This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. Our topic today, Russia and the oil field services business. Russ Capper sits down with Pat Szymczak, president of the Oconto Group, a company she founded in Russia in 1994, focusing on helping oil field service companies enter the dynamic Russian market. All that right after this.
At BKD, we understand the constantly shifting nature of the energy industry. As a national CPA and advisory firm, we serve energy clients from the beginning to the end of the cycle. Our experienced energy advisors serve approximately 300 energy companies in exploration, midstream, downstream, oilfield services, and power production. Plus, we're the largest North American member of the Praxity Global Alliance, which means we can help you wherever you operate. Contact a BKD advisor or visit us online to learn more.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Russ Capper.
Hi, Russ Capper, and welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. Our topic now, doing business in Russia. And my guest is Pat Davis Szymczak, the president of the Oconto Group. Pat, welcome to the Energy Makers Show.
Thank you very much, Russ. It's a pleasure to be here.
You bet. Tell us about the Oconto Group.
Well, the Oconto Group is one of two companies that I started in Russia. One of them is a media and marketing solutions company. The Oconto Group focuses on consulting for market entry into the Russian market.
Okay.
We can also do Kazakhstan, but I would say that Russia is our specialty. I myself have been in Russia full-time in Moscow since 1994. Largely involved in entrepreneurial activities to start trade press media in the energy industry. However, my first trip in was actually in 1973 as a student, as I did Russian studies in university, and came in as a foreign correspondent in '91 and actually was shot at in one of the coups.
Wow, my goodness. Wow.
Anyway, but came back in to when it was basically an entrepreneurial candy land in the early 90s.
Well, in 1973, it was completely different, right?
It was totally different, very much different.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of energy opportunity and sort of a symbiotic type potential relationship with the U.S. Your business is almost exclusively focused on the energy space, correct?
Almost exclusively focused. Our trade press media is totally focused.
Okay.
And our consulting business, we can do other things, but where our real sweet spot is in the energy industry. And when I say energy industry, I'm speaking about the equipment manufacturers, field services, new products that are looking for a home, export, as well as assisting Russian companies that are interested in looking at possibilities in the United States, as well as U.S. companies, and principally that is Texas because it's the oil field,
right,
that are looking at even manufacturing opportunities or co-ventures in Russia.
Okay, now when you say trade press, are you talking about an energy trade press producing newsletters, newspapers
yes, exactly.
in Russia about the industry in Russia?
Exactly. I've been involved in that since 1994 when the trade press was really being established.
Okay.
94, 95. The people who were involved in some of the earliest publications there, and I'm talking about publications from a U.S. audience point of view. You can think in terms of like an oil and gas journal, World Oil, Hearts, these types of publications.
Right.
We were getting them all going, Americans, Brits, and Russians working together in the mid-90s.
Okay.
And then that, over time, created a thriving trade press media, as well as spinning off various consulting companies because you meet a lot of people and you get to understand how things work, and then you're in a position to pass that knowledge on to newcomers.
Okay, and that's what you're consulting on.
And that's what the
Oconto
Oconto Group is all about. Yes, that is correct. The media company is part of the Oconto Group, and that's Oil and Gas Eurasia.
Okay, so when I think of media and journalism in Russia, I think of it like, and even particularly in the energy space, there's been some sort of controversial things that took place over there, nationalization of companies and so forth. Would those sorts of things be in your newsletter?
Well, of course it would, but we are not focusing on that sort of thing.
Right.
The types of issues that you're talking about is actually covered by mass media. That's
Okay.
the mass media that is being served up, and to be frank with you, it is a disservice
Okay.
for business relations, and I think it's a Cold War hangover.
Okay.
And when people in the 90s used to joke that it was going to be 3 generations before Russia would straighten itself out,
Right.
I think that's probably on our side of things also, because there's too many old Cold Warriors that have their careers wrapped up in maintaining the attitude that Russia is an enemy.
Right. Help me clarify this. You say that's a disservice. It's a disservice to focus on that, or it's a disservice that it happened?
Well, it's basically it's a disservice to incorrectly report what's actually going on.
Okay.
Okay.
And has that been incorrectly reported?
Very
a lot?
much
Okay.
so incorrectly reported.
Okay.
Everyone, basically because of the nationalization of UCOS
Right.
back in, I think it was 2003 now,
Right.
which was a purely Russian political spat that had to do with who was going to be next in the Kremlin, and had absolutely nothing to do with business relations.
Okay.
It had to do with who was getting what with regard to Kremlin politics.
But wouldn't that affect business relations and interests of
No.
U.S. companies?
Excuse me, no.
Okay.
No.
Why not?
BP has made money hand over fist.
Okay.
With its basically its projects there. You have
Okay.
ExxonMobil, you have Chevron, you have Shell, you have Statoil, Total. Name a company, and they're active there, and they're active in joint ventures with those very nationalized companies that you're referring to.
Okay.
And also, I do not understand why Russia is basically put down for creating a national oil company, which
Right.
is what Rosneft is about.
Right.
When
There's others.
our companies are
Right.
very happy to do business with Brazil,
Right.
with Petronas.
Good point.
I mean,
And you're saying no U.S. company's really been burnt by any of the nationalization that took place in Russia?
depends on what you mean by burnt, and depends on how it's being spun in general mass media press.
Okay. Well, I mean, they lost value. They owned ownership in a company, and they no longer own it.
UCOS was owned by a Russian oligarch.
Okay, so it
Who
was
lost
all
value?
taking place with that's my
what I'm
point,
saying.
yeah.
It's a Russian internal family matter.
Interesting.
And of course, we reacted with horror because this happened about 3 days before. Well, some say it was Chevron, some say it was ExxonMobil, but there was about to be a buyout of UCOS by one of the IOCs.
Okay.
And essentially,
It didn't happen.
It just didn't happen.
Okay,
It
all
just
right.
didn't happen. My focus is on oil field equipment,
Right.
services. They're making a heck of a lot of money over there.
Right. Companies outside of Russia are making a lot of money with
They're
oil field
making a
services
lot of money
in Russia.
And when people say to me, "Oh, well, Putin took over UCOS in 2003,"
Yeah.
I say, you know what? So long as you don't want to be president and challenge Putin for his Kremlin,
Yeah.
I don't think you have a problem selling your pumps there.
Okay, cool.
In fact, they all want to buy your pumps,
Okay, so
which is where the business opportunity
okay,
is.
so is business at an all-time high right now on revenue, oil field services
Well,
business?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's because Russia is basically a petroeconomy,
Right.
And unfortunately, 50% of its GDP rests on oil exports. It's very much like Middle Eastern countries
Right.
in that regard. They have to keep their they have to keep the oil flowing, and where the oil is in the future is Arctic offshore and greenfield sites in the Far East, where it's going to be a lot more expensive. That's why they're setting up all these JVs with all the international companies in consortium. And the international companies are all very happy to work there because they want a piece of
Sure.
East Siberia and they want a piece of the Arctic.
Sure.
Because of the expense of that, they have to keep production in West Siberia at a more or less even keel. And production has again started to decline. You probably know that one of the key reasons, besides the arms race, but one of the key reasons for the collapse of the Soviet Union was the decline in production in West Siberia. And several Texas companies that I know of that even now are doing fantastic business over there were sought out by Soviet delegations that came here in 90, 91 looking for artificial lift equipment, enhanced recovery, oil recovery technologies, and so forth, to get West Siberia back up. West Siberia was brought back up by the massive infusion of Western technology in mature fields, West Siberia, which pretty much feeds Europe for oil and for gas, for that matter, from Uruguay. Siberian production was brought up. Now Siberian production is going back into decline. These are wells that have been in business for like 50 years.
All right, we'll be back with more with Pat Davis Szymczak after this.
Welcome to this edition of The Power of People, where we explore how to bring out the best in your most valuable asset. I'm Robin Knowles, President and CEO of TDS, the Workforce Performance Experts. Today we're talking with Greg Schaefer about determining the cause of performance problems. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
I think any leader has noticed cases where an employee receives training, but training really doesn't give them the results they're looking for.
Yeah, this happens often. Many times when people's performance isn't at the expected level, some managers like to throw training at the problem. But just because a person is not performing a job at where we want them to be does not necessarily mean they're in need of training.
So how can we tell then when it's a performance issue that requires training or there's another issue there?
Well, there's a couple of questions you could think about asking. Number one is ask if this person's life depended on it, would they be able to perform this task at the proficiency level? Or maybe have they completed this task before correctly? Have they ever done it before? And if the answer to either one of these questions is yes, then you're on to something. Because if a person can perform a task correctly and they're simply not doing it, you do not have a training problem.
Then what do you have?
Well, think about some of the things that we all know how to do, yet we don't do them. And some of those examples would be to drive safely, keep our speed under control in heavy traffic, or maybe healthy eating habits, maintaining good habits there. All the information we need and the reasons for doing that are very available to us. They're readily available, yet we struggle to get those done. That's because we lack proper motivation. Likewise, a worker may fail at a task because of a motivation issue. Or there may be a systemic problem inside the organization that prevents learners from executing a task properly. Perhaps they don't have the proper tools to do the job. We call these resource problems. So at TDS, we assess an organization in terms of the knowledge, motivation, and the resources in order to determine where the problem lies. And once we know what the problem is, then we start to build a strategy to resolve that.
Thank you so much, Greg.
You're welcome, Robin.
This has been another edition of The Power of People. Join us again next time to learn more about how you can develop excellence in your workforce while getting the best possible ROI from your human capital.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Russ Capper.
All right, continuing on with Pat Davis Szymczak of the Oconto Group. Back to this bringing the fields in the West, back up to production. You're saying there's a huge opportunity right now for companies in the oil field services to get involved, right?
Absolutely, because the issue there is that there is a tremendous oil field services industry there already, but it is based on the needs of producing West Siberia as it existed 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, so it's not up to date.
Right,
okay.
And one of the things, you find kind of a step change in terms of the management teams that are now running Russian companies, because in the past, you had people who were legacy from the Soviet Union who had different ideas. For instance, they were paid by the Soviet government by how many meters they would drill. So they weren't looking at the economics of the project. They were basically, they were good boys or bad boys depending upon how many meters they drilled.
Wow.
And their salaries were based on that.
Oh, wow.
There's a whole new crop of young people in their 30s and early 40s who have grown up on a commercial capitalist approach, and these people are basically being moved into these positions.
Now, before I let you go, give me an example of one of your consulting projects.
Okay, well, we had one oilfield services company that produces a particular type of pumping equipment and automation equipment for field automation in mature reservoirs. And basically, we worked with them on a marketing campaign that had to do with setting them up at the right conferences, the right events.
They were a U.S. company?
This is a Texas-based company.
Okay.
And we set them up with the right conferences, the right. We helped them with some of their local organization in terms of just their administrative organization with Russian accounting and opening a bank and bank account and things like this. But they also had an interest in local manufacturing. And one of the keys in working with Russia is a lot of companies, kind of like if you were coming in from Antarctica, you grew up in Antarctica, you came to the United States and you wanted to do manufacturing of something for sale to Texas oilmen, would you go to New York and set up an office?
No.
You'd come to Houston and set up an office,
absolutely.
Right? Well, everybody goes to Moscow and they drink vodka with some Ivan Ivanich Ivanov, sign a piece of paper that says that guy's going to be their distributor. They come back home to the States and then wonder why everything falls apart. And what I did with these fellows was I took them out to Tyumen, which is the provincial capital of West Siberia, and very, very strong on recruiting business, very much like in the States, where you have different states competing with each other with tax breaks and infrastructure, manufacturing, so forth. Same thing goes on over there with the regions. And I have extremely good relations with the Tyumen governor's office, and took the guys out there. They showed them industrial parks. They showed them industrial parks with infrastructure.
Cool.
They took them out to meet potential partners and that sort of stuff.
So you're actually helping companies that want to get into this West Siberia oilfield services area.
Exactly, because in the end, what that means is, that 50% GDP, that I said that's based on oil.
Right.
If you help the companies that are doing the manufacturing, that has spin-offs in other industries. That has spin-offs in construction. That has spin-offs in, you need to have food stores to feed the people.
Right.
And that's what builds an economy. And that's what totally gets lost so often in discussions about what's going on over there. It's not about who's trading on the NYSE and how much oil they're shipping. It's about these guys that are making the economy work out in the area where real people live.
Thank you very much, Pat, for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Russ.
You bet. That's Pat Davis Szymczak with the Oconto Group. And this is the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio and seen at TheEnergyMakers.com.